A very good morning to you and welcome to Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado. Today on the show, we shall be taking a look at the very latest in politics. We have by-elections happening today and we shall be focusing on that. But far from that, let's take a look at what's making headlines in the local dailies. As you have seen, it's all politics on the Standard. But let's start off with a regional overview and see what you need to know this morning. Starting off with the Pearl of Africa is the Daily Monitor this morning, and they're telling us what Museveni promised Ugandans in his inaugural speech for the 6th term. And he is pictured right there, of course, during that inauguration that happened yesterday. And of course, Museveni promises 10% economic growth in his new term. So this is very interesting. Of course, the economy is something that is of huge importance to Ugandans, particularly in this time where the coronavirus has dealt a blow to very many economies, the Ugandan economy not being exempt. Then we have opposition muted as Museveni starts 5 more years. NUP spokesperson Joel Sienyonyi says Bobi Wine, who was unobtrusively out of sight today, will swear in from Kololo Independence Ground. Then you're told Museveni, the region's security doyen, the Ugandan People's Defense Force, or the National Resistance Army, as its precursor was called, says it has defeated 27 homegrown rebel groups. Take a look at that, find out what's happening in Uganda. But let's take a look at what's happening on the opposite side of Kenya, that is Tanzania. We have Mwinyi hails Ndulu Limpumba role in transforming Tanzania's economy. Still the economy being in focus. Like we said, that's a big thing in these times. At a time when Tanzania was in an economic quagmire following the collapse of recovery negotiations with the International Monetary Fund, it was actually two distinguishing economists who came to the rescue. Take a look at that, see how these ones actually played a role in ensuring that the Tanzanian economy was saved. But far from that, why British ministers' visit to Tanzania matters. The United Kingdom Minister for Africa, James Dudridge, started his official visit with Tanzania. Of course, right now they have a new leader, and of course having negotiations and diplomatic relations established under this new leadership is quite important. And still on diplomacy, China gives Tanzania 35.37 billion shillings alone. The Chinese government has provided that amount of money to Tanzania for the implementation of various development projects. And this is not a new thing. They have been partnering for many years now, particularly when it comes to infrastructural development. Then we have Rwanda today. This morning, they're telling us Somalia rejects ex-Ghanaian president sent by AU over Kenya links. The former president was to help mediate Somalia's political impasse with Kenya, and it has been an on and off situation, and right now it is off again. So this man was supposed to be key in mediation, but Somalia said no. Then Africa heads of state in Uganda for Museveni inauguration. The presidents were received by Uganda's State Minister for Foreign Affairs, Henry Oyem Okello, as at Entebbe Airport. Then we have 9 dead in Russia school shooting, a very unfortunate story that broke yesterday. Take a look at that. We're also told about Ebola, thousands getting Ebola jab to help treat the coronavirus. A very important story in the medical field. This is something that is saving many lives. The border between Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo is a busy town where over 50,000 people are crossing every day for different economic situations. Let's take a look at the East African paper, see what's making headlines. Here we're told Uganda's Museveni takes oath of office. This is, of course, the live report by NTV. But then we are also given a tally of the infections of the coronavirus in the region. Tanzania, 509. Clearly not the real number, but this is the number since April last year. Kenya is at 164,386. Uganda, 42,427. Rwanda is at 25,804. 46. Then we have Africa heads of state in Uganda for Museveni inauguration. We saw that unfolding live here on KTN News yesterday. And then we're also told AMISOM to get mandate extension to December. AU Peace and Security Council agreed to extend that mandate, and the decision will now be transmitted to the UN Security Council for a vote later on. There's so much that's being covered here. You can take a look regionally in business, science, health, and what have you. Then let's take a look at the world page rather of the CNN website. A very peculiar looking man here, a Maori leader removed from New Zealand Parliament after performing the haka dance. And this is a traditional dance that is supposed to be done for various reasons at funerals, in celebrations, weddings even. So take a look at that and see why his actions were deemed inappropriate and why he was kicked out. Then Nepal tries to form a new government as its COVID crisis deepens. The Japanese city that's rooting for South Sudan at the Olympics. And then who done it? Sport's greatest unsolved kidnapping 30 years on. And then a CNN anchor presses leader on corruption claims. That is the CNN. Take a look at those papers to learn what's happening around the world. But of course, we have news from closer to home, and we shall be taking a look at the local papers to see what's making headlines. And as you saw earlier on, it's all politics on both the Daily Nation and the Standard. On the front page of the Standard, we are told more DP's allies face the Jubilee Axe. And this is also, there's a similar headline on the Daily Nation this morning, all back and no bite. That is the question. Ruto's wake-up call. That is the Daily Nation this morning. There's more on the Business Daily. If we have time, we shall dig deeper into that. But just to introduce my guests this morning, we have Kariuki Wanjiru, who's a political analyst. We also have Stephen Mwakesi, who's a public policy analyst, as well as joining us via Zoom, David Matsanga, who is a political commentator. Thank you for joining us this morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Trix. Thank you.
Good morning. Now, I'll start off with Dr. Matsanga, who's joining us via Zoom. What is your reaction to this? Of course, one of the biggest stories this week is the inauguration of President Yoweri Museveni. It's on the front page of the Daily Nation. They say Museveni eyes 40 years in power, lectures the West at his inauguration. What did you make of that event and, of course, how it's been covered by the press?
Thank you very much, KTN, for inviting me. And I woke up very early to take this call because it is very important to me. For 37 years,
yes,
I have been telling the world and I've been opposing the policies of President Museveni. That's point number one. Mm-hmm. For the first time in history, there is something that touched me, which I agreed with, and that is the Pan-Africanism angle, where he turned on. Are we all right there?
Yes, we are right. We can hear you loud and clear.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, perfectly.
Where he turned on Africans and told them exactly, and the President Uhuru Kenyatta was sitting there. This is what I've been saying for all this time. Mm-hmm. In my 7 years. I've been saying there is a country in Europe that has dismembered Africa. If you look at the whole of Africa, it is gone to terrorists. It is gone to very many people. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, mm-hmm. The whole of North, even Nigeria is being broken to pieces. That one caught my eye. The second thing that caught my eye in the President Museveni's speech is for the first time in 40 years for President Museveni to recognize that Dr. Milton Obote did something good for East African integration and African Pan-Africanism. Those two caught my eye, my ear, and I've agreed with him. But the rest of the other things remains and remain something that is precious to some people, pain, tears to some people. But for me, on these two, plus the economy, yes, Uganda has its surplus. It's true. Sugar is plenty. Maize is plenty. It's surplus. So it is up to the people of East African region to tap into that and buy those things instead of some parts of Africa crying for food. Those are my points from His Excellency President Museveni's speech yesterday.
Absolutely, and we do know that the election this time round faced a lot of controversy, and he did touch on that, particularly the condescension from the West. He says, here's a quote in this article on the back page of the Daily Nation. He says, "It is quite comical to hear of some actors in the West giving us lectures about democracy. We designed this system not from air-conditioned rooms, but from the jungles in our country where we lived with the people," he said, at the Akoni Kololo ceremonial grounds in Kampala. Now, Dr. Matsanga, still on that, what do you make of that? There's a lot of questions about how he was elected this time round again, but at the same time, there's that dynamic of the West trying to lecture African nations about how to carry out their, elections and their democracy, even though their unique circumstances are usually unique. When it comes to Uganda, what do you make of that dynamic?
For 40 years again, I have been in a struggle against when he took up arms and fought our government. I was, by the way, I want to tell you, and the viewers in Kenya and the million watching, I worked with Dr. Milton Obote as one of the PAs of Dr. Milton Obote. We overthrown him in 1985. It is not Museveni who overthrew us, but our own general was in July 1985. But for 40 years, we have struggled when he went to the bush where he said he did his democracy.
Yes.
Some of us have never agreed with the 10 fundamental ideas that he brought. Some have worked, some have not worked. But on the question of elections, when your colleague Rogers was interviewing me about 1 month ago or 2 months ago, no, 3 months ago, sorry, I told you elections in Uganda are one before you go to the ballot. There was a waste of, look, in Africa, let's talk the truth. Why do you go into an election? I am different from the Besigye. I am different from the Bob Wine because I'm one of the veterans. I have been there, I've seen, I warned these people.
Yes.
My brother Besigye, I warned him not to work with Museveni. The younger man, Bob Wine, was not born when I was struggling against Museveni. But I told you, the elections in Uganda are one before the ballot is cast. The process of winning election in Uganda is called gerrymandering. If anybody has gone to school like a Besigye, he should know that the elections in Uganda are gerrymandered before the vote. It's not like you in Kenya.
Okay.
In Kenya, you prepare your constituencies. You register your voters. You display your certificates. Our country, our elections are gerrymandered. So when you go to this type of elections, you must know that you are going to lose. And when you lose, there is one thing that I want to tell you this morning, and most of the viewers who doubt my stance, that has made me, through God's will, be alive today. I don't oppose a constitutional court. Once a Supreme Court has ruled that although the elections were rigged and they had a few hiccups here and there, that's the end of the journey. This land to be constitutional.
Right.
That is all. I'm a peacemaker. I don't want to go beyond the Supreme Court and start other of destroying the property.
Right.
of destroying people. Already Ugandans are poor. How do you go to the street to destroy their shops, their houses? Let's wait for another 5 years. I have grown in a democracy in Britain, which has taught me the values that you don't hate your enemy permanently. I struggled with Museveni until I shook my head with him in 2008. In my tribe where I come from, Wanjiru is there, will know
Yes.
you don't come back to fight with after you have shaken your hand.
Okay.
So I say, let me do other things. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Matsanga. Now I'd like to get the views of our studio guests this morning. On page 14, we're told Museveni hits at the West as he's sworn in for the 6th term. And of course, this is the similar angle that was being headlined here at in the back page of the Daily Nation. They say Museveni lectures the West as he is sworn in. And also say, telling off. Museveni says Uganda's democracy was built by the public after people got tired of colonial hangovers. Okay, Mr. Ngunjiri, what do you make of this one? Museveni was quite vocal about Ugandan democracy, let me just put it that way.
Yes, first of all, is to underscore the most important point here, that there is a generation in Uganda of the young people, those of my generation, who have never seen anybody else at the helm of the presidency other than President Museveni, those that were born after 1985. For Museveni to argue that the Western countries are trying to lecture African countries on democracy, first of all, I want to agree with President Museveni on that one. Because ever since the Western project failed in East Asia, the only soft landing would have been, of course, Africa. But when countries, even as late as in the 1980s, in the Frelimo, Mozambique,
Right.
the struggle that was led by Samora Machel, which could be at times be supported by the likes of President Julius Nyerere, mirrors an image of a protracted struggle that President Museveni is talking about, that he has been able to build Uganda not from the Western imperial policies, but from internal and organic cultures, norms, and the traditions of the country of Uganda. In this case, for the people of Uganda, I think the first time they saw a civilian president, after now the fall of the presidency of Idi Amin, I think it was on a very short stint. And now that President Museveni has been sworn in again, this proves the point that in Uganda there is a political culture and people have already given it legitimacy that perhaps a civilian would not easily be able to capture power and form government, because already Besigye from the year 2000s when he started vying as president, and now we have Bobi Wine. But even for the democratic principles of the country of Uganda, right, I think even if Museveni has been able to be tainted as repressive, which is proved by, for example, switching off social media and media during elections, I think that the opposition in Uganda has been caught up in their own contradictions. Because for you to beat Museveni, I think you need to apply things that Museveni applied to get to power. It's like Dr. Matsanga said, you'll never, I don't think when Museveni, as long as Museveni is alive and is vying for presidency, there cannot be a democratic transition. That might sound controversial in the current society, but I think the circumstances of the country of Uganda, even the citizens themselves, giving legitimacy to the presidency that comes to power through those protracted struggles and this proves the point that for the country of Uganda, until when the opposition in Uganda will come out of their steel pocket and realize that the way to beat Museveni is different, maybe to apply some of his formulas when he was fighting in the bush, but in this case, that would bring civil unrest.
Yeah.
And it would perhaps attract international attention, which has been the incentives of the likes of Bobi Wine, because every time they want to go
So are you saying that we should just wait for him to willingly retire, step aside?
No. What I'm saying is they need to apply means that are going to, because the opposition in Uganda has been depending very much on the incentives of the international community, whereby they will provoke government, and then government will maybe arrest Bobi Wine or it will beat up his supporters. And in this case, maybe Bobi Wine will be able to attract sympathy
support and
international support. Yeah. And in that whole thing, I think that is where the people will now be able to see, or rather seek the truth, because in the current state, the government wouldn't allow any information that is negative about the state to come out of the opposition of Uganda. So for them to beat him, I think the arbitrary means of capturing power in this case, even if they will not cause an insurgency or civil unrest, they could apply means that are legitimate and allowed.
Now the question is, what are these means, politically speaking?
Most of them could be like we saw in Kenya here. Some of them, you see, when you have a candidate like Kizza Besigye, who has been a soldier and who understands Museveni in and out, I think the best tool that Ugandans can use to oust Museveni, or even the opposition of Uganda, is one, to be able to build, because of course the state has organizational depth in Uganda, they can be able to build an alternative force that seeks to mirror what they deem as their own doctrines and beliefs. So they just don't need to do things the same way.
All right, Mr. Mwakesi, what do you make of that sentiment and perhaps what was said yesterday during the inauguration ceremony?
Well, thank you, Trix. Good morning, Kenyans. I think for me, when I look at the situation of what happened in the inauguration yesterday, it was quite telling when you look at the people who were invited for that inauguration, who sat next to the president, Museveni.
Right.
We had the AU chairman, Felix Tshisekedi, who himself was just recently elected into office. Then we had Salva Kiir from South Sudan, who himself also has some situation in terms of how he's been running his unity government with Riek Machar. And then we have Samia Suluhu, who just came into power by virtue of the unfortunate death of her predecessor, and who went through an election which by many terms was touted as being not democratic in every sense of the term from the Western perspective. And then we had also President Uhuru Kenyatta, who also in 2017 had to undergo a second election, which literally he ran as the only candidate after Raila Odinga decided not to run in that repeat election.
Are you saying he's in good company?
So I think what President Museveni was trying to say is that there is a form of democracy that's made in Africa, and especially East Africa.
But is it right, Mr. Mwakesi?
I do not believe it's right, because if you look at the situation that happened, for example, in the DRC, I mean, it was very shocking how Tshisekedi came out of nowhere and beat a favorite of the West at the time, Mr. Martin Fayulu. And suddenly we had a new president who it was quite unprecedented that he would be able to even take over power at the time. There was a lot of questions about that particular election. Same thing happened in Tanzania. We still find that the opposition candidate still puts a lot of question in how the election was run and even how the votes were tallied. So he gives a perspective that is quite different from what the West really expects. There was very huge hype in Uganda during the elections that it was going to look like Bobi Wine would win. And Museveni went about talking about doing a scientific election and being very confident that people are going to see things from a different perspective as opposed to what the West sees. In my view, I think we should begin to entertain some of these conversations. He is the most senior-most leader in the region at this particular point, and probably with his position now, he might be able to begin to drive the region into a different political perspective. I think it's also important to note that we are at a point whereby the East African community is considering now moving into a political confederation. And I think with that idea of political confederation and moving to a political federation eventually, there is a new style or decision making that these new leaders will be looking at in terms of ensuring that how people perceive the way we elect our leaders and choose our leaders is different from how the West perceives it. I do not particularly agree with it. I mean, democracy is a tenet that has been here with us for a lot of years. I think we just need to help the ideology and the belief that it's the people who are meant to decide who its leaders are, and not these horse trading or manipulations done by people who wield power and hold positions of authority in every electoral cycle.
Okay. Now, I'd like us to get the opinion of Dr. Matsanga as we conclude this subject of the Ugandan Yoweri Museveni's inauguration yesterday. He talked about East African integration, and he mentioned poverty, and he said he talked to, this was basically a gathering of East African leaders, let's say, and other dignitaries, and he says that poverty has remained strong, or rather a problem in Africa, and he said a stronger integration between the countries and their leadership will help, of course, deal with this issue as opposed to them being divided. Dr. Matsanga, what's your take on that, particularly with the view of East Africa integration?
Absolutely right. He's right on that one. And believe me or not, I've told you those are the key things that made some of us not even to come out and decide. I have been acquitted. I would have already jumped with a very tough statement. There are things that you can credit Museveni with. One, security. I liked the way Museveni moved to go to Somalia.
Right.
Even if you want to kill me, I will support him for pacification of Somalia. Our troops were the first troops. In fact, if they gave us Ugandans authority, we would have swept those guys to Indian Ocean. They would be there, and Uganda would come back. Look at what Museveni did in Karamoja. There was cattle rustling.
Right.
You don't see it anymore. Africa needs some things like that tampered with democracy. They have, of course, the other opposition leaders. Someone talked about this. Let me tell you today on this national television, who made the rules that are making us cry today? It's Besigye. Besigye was Museveni's right-hand man. He was a minister of state who actually ordered for the arrest of all of us into Luzira. Today, 37 years ago, are passed. He's crying of the same rule that he laid down against us. I have never crossed to Museveni. I don't support President Museveni on something. I support him on credit. Like the question of France, the French dismembering Africa. I am one of those who can hate me. You can even kill me if you want. But the truth is that France is dismembering Africa. It is bringing war. Total Oil is bringing war to the entire Africa. Look at Nigeria. Nigeria is falling to pieces. What do we do? Gaddafi I am the only person again, 9 years ago, who stood firm, supported Museveni and the African Union to say don't bomb Gaddafi.
Right.
We had actually, I want to tell you today, also reveal like M7, I and Ribondo, we had got a plane from Mugabe, which was on standby to fly, I myself, with pilots, to remove Gaddafi. But we were betrayed by France and Jean Ping, who was the AU chairperson. Such people in Africa should not leave. Museveni was right yesterday. Coming back to elections in Africa, my humble advice to the younger man, Bob Wine, my son, because he's equivalent to my firstborn, I want to tell him, you have taken up a mantle to fight for the people of Uganda, but leave space enough for engagement. Because in political science, you need engagement.
Right.
If you don't have engagement and you're enticed by some few Julius Soros operations, you can end up in trouble. I agree on the third one, on the question of food, economy. Truly speaking, Uganda is endowed with the good climate, good weather. The rainfall 70 degrees throughout. Production has come back home. Sugar is in plenty. Maize is in plenty. Yes, African countries should begin trading instead of, did you know that, my dear sister, it is very difficult to go to South Africa if you have a Kenyan passport or Ugandan passport.
Right.
They will tell you to bring 200 files, including your dead father's death certificate. Because you want a visa only to visit South Africa. So time has come for Africa to change their modus operandi. Interact, integrate, sell your goods. And also, the final thing that makes my heart as an leader in Africa is to see the border between Uganda and Rwanda closed for 2 years. President Museveni and Kagame don't see eye to eye. Let's not sit here and go to Kampala and come and keep quiet. There is a proxy war. I'm telling you, there is a proxy war in the region where the same power of Total Oil will spark a war very soon. Museveni and Kagame don't see eye to eye. Rwandese have to fly to Kenya in order to go to Uganda. Surely, Ugandans have to fly to Kenya in order to go to Rwanda. Surely, is this the Africa that we want? If that is the Africa that we want, let me remain in exile in Britain, where I am.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Watsanga, for your candor on these matters. Collaboration indeed is the way forward for African nations when it comes to developing beyond the stages that we have reached. Now, let's come closer to home and take a look at what's making headlines in local politics. The front page of the Standard this morning says more DPs, allies, face Jubilee axe, they say, buoyed by victory against the nominated Senator Isaac Mwaura. The party's top organ has endorsed removal of 3 MPs, 4 opposing BBI and supporting ideals of other parties. And this is also reflected on the front page of the Daily Nation. It says, all back and no bite, Ruto's wake-up call. To his rivals, the string of losses the deputy president has suffered in recent contests have exposed his soft underbelly, but his supporters say he's still the strongest politician. Now, let's take a look at this story and see what we can, and before we get into the discussion. Now, the ruling party, Jubilee, is unrelenting in its move to crack the whip on members of parliament regarding the rebels. The party's national Management Committee is now training its arsenal on Gatundu South MP Moses Kuria as well as nominated MP Cecily Mbarira in its latest push to clean up the party. The party's organ has also put on notice 5 nominated senators who survived expulsion last week, saying it will be relooking into the issue. The move by the party is coming a day after Firebrand-nominated Senator Isaac Mwaura lost his position. Former Member of Parliament Sami Leshoe has already been gazetted as nominated senator for representing people living with disability. Jeff Kirui brings us this one.
The cleanup in Jubilee Party is set to go a notch higher following a meeting today of the National Management Committee. Gatundu South Member of Parliament and nominated MP Cecily Mbarire, both close allies of Deputy President William Ruto, are next on the chopping board. The biggest target being Moses Kuria, who is accused of advancing the interests of another political party while still a member of Jubilee Party. Kuria has been fronting the People's Empowerment Party PEP, even unveiling a candidate in George Koimburi for the Juja parliamentary by-election.
Ushindi wa PEP, ushindi wa Koimburi ni ushindi wa Hasra Nation na ni ushindi wa mwananchi wa kawaida.
And further complicating matters for himself is his allegations that a section of parliamentarians were bribed to vote for BBI, which has placed him on a warpath with the party's bigwigs. The onslaught on Moses Kuria happening just a day after Isaac Mwaura lost his seat and now will be forced to fight his way back from outside, as his removal was effected despite a court order barring its implementation until his petition is determined. In a Gazette notice dated 11th May, IEBC deleted the name of Isaac Mwaura from the Jubilee Party list as nominated senator representing people living with disabilities and replaced him with former Samburu Senator Sami Leshoe. Leshoe, who now is expected to be sworn in to take Mwaura's place at the Senate, contested for Samburu senatorial Jubilee ticket, but later decamped to Kanu. After losing to Jubilee's Letumbesi Lelegwe in 2017 general election, Sami Leshoe went back to Jubilee Party. According to Jubilee Party nomination list, the next in line for consideration in the category of people living with disabilities was Joyce Amasong, but picking her would have contravened the constitution on membership of the Senate. According to Article 98, 2 members being 1 woman and 1 man will be nominated to represent people living with disabilities. In 2017, Jubilee Party negotiated with NASA on how to fill the position, where NASA nominated a woman and Jubilee nominated a man.
Nachukua nafasi hii kumkaribisha na kumpokea Mheshimiwa Mwaura katika siasa za Asla Nation.
Isaac Mwaura's tribulations began when he switched his allegiance to Deputy President William Ruto, even advancing interests of Ruto's fallback plan in United Democratic Alliance UDA, should his term in Jubilee Party become untenable. Jubilee Party National Management Committee ultimately deciding to expel him together with his nominated colleagues, including Mary Senator, Falhada Iman Deko, Naomi Wako, Victor Prengei, and Millicent Omanga. The party is also pushing for the removal of the 5 who got reprieve from the political parties tribunal, which ruled that their expulsion from the party was not procedural. Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
Thank you very much, Kirui, for that story. Now, all back and no bite. Do you agree that is a question that's being, or do you think this is a question, actually, Mr. Ngunjiri, about Ruto? Because this is being termed as a wake-up call by the nation this morning. Is it?
You see, first of all, you have to ask yourself on which parameters are they talking about the popularity of Ruto. And it could have been because of the National Assembly.
Yes.
And yet, in this case, he decided to, you see, the way in a desert, you would have a very strong wind that comes with all this whole dust and everything. So what you do is you bend, and then the wind will pass, and then when dust has settled, that is when you'll be able to raise your head. That is the conventional wisdom in this case. And I don't think Ruto is interested in the tug of war within the parties, within BBI and everything. And I think that is why he decided to say, you go and practice your liberal democratic values in this vote. Whichever way you vote, Kenya will move on. And even in the next dispensation, we will go with what the people of Kenya will decide on this one. On the case of numbers, I think there has been a reckless and stupid narrative that has been peddled by the media and certain sadists that the deputy president is in competition with the president. That has been a war that has been funded mostly by the media, but I don't think it exists.
What would be the opposing narrative to this one that you think is reckless?
The opposing narrative is that for the sake of peace and prosperity of Kenya, the deputy president agreed that as we speak, the president has decided to reconstitute his way of operations in government, and even the duties that he used to be given have already been given to other people in government, and he has no problem with that. And so he has accepted that. But on this particular one of the issue of numbers, I think even the comparison that has been drawn, I don't know, Raila has 50 what, Uhuru and Ruto 83. I think this is just a base of perception, because as we had on Ruto's side, there were no whippings that you go and vote on this particular bill based on this one. Go and vote on your conviction and for the interest of the people you represent. So it doesn't make sense that someone is arguing that the case of numbers can be seen in an arbitrary environment where members of the county assembly, who most of them have there has been a lot of threat hawking, and also persuasion, you know, with money and grants and everything, and even members of parliament. It's very easy to lobby them to vote for a particular bill. So you cannot test the popularity of anyone based on the National Assembly or based on the county assembly's vote. I think when Ruto decided not to take a position of either yes or no, he dismantled the existence of a possibility where people will be able to compare him with somebody else, because he decided to stay neutral. And in staying neutral, then you don't literally show your might. But when we come to, I think, 2022, because I have heard him say that he's not interested in the battle of yes or no in the BBI. So he will work with whichever model will be bathed through the BBI. But when it comes to the 2022 contest, which I think will be the end and the biggest comparison, then you can be able now to ask the popularity question.
Yeah, there is that, but also the more recent loss is that of Isaac Mwaura's position right now, and of course this is said to be translated as one of the losses that the DP camp is experiencing, and then the guns now apparently have been trained on other DP supporters. Then the question would be how much, it's not even just popularity, how much clout does he have right now politically? And I'd like you to hold that thought. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we shall dig deeper into the situation as it is right now.
This is KTN News. Salad vegetable cooking oil is the clear-flowing secret to tasty meals. Buy 5 liters of Salad vegetable cooking oil today and get 250 grams of Zesta tomato sauce for free. Iflo Kama Salad. Salad vegetable cooking oil available in all cooking outlets countrywide.
Introducing the new Salad oil with a